I'm Dean Walker, and welcome to the Poetry of Predicament podcast, a podcast for people brave enough to face humanity's challenges and problems, and most importantly, our numerous predicaments. The Poetry of Predicament is a podcast meant to inspire us to bring forth grace, beauty, and connection with the web of life in the face of a predicament-laden world. Help us in welcoming our guest for this episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, therapist and creator of a recent online summit focusing on the loneliness of our times, Laura Parker. Laura shares some of the learnings and insights she experienced in the creation of this profound gathering of global thought leaders on loneliness. Well, let's get this party started. Welcome to another round of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, and today I am thrilled to be meeting in real time Laura Parker, who Laura, the only way I know Laura is through her recent creation of an online summit with a rather unusual topic. And I'm, as those of you who have watched the Poetry of Predicament and have followed the rest of my body of work, you know what it's like to watch somebody take on a very difficult topic and to put it out there to the world and have it be something that others might find interest and value in. So Laura, I want to thank you for your work in putting that together, and I'm very excited to be talking with you because as we were just talking before we got recording, I consider us to be consciously or unconsciously kind of walking a similar or parallel path, and that this path is really a time on the planet at a time for humanity like no other that has ever been. And in some interesting way, I see that I look forward to us both sharing about our experience of being on this path. And perhaps that could start with you, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself in the way you'd like to be known, and describing just a little bit about what has been your path to here that has led you to this kind of emphasis and focus on, in this case, loneliness. And hi, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Dean. I'm so happy to be invited to join you today. And wow, that question, how would I like to be known? I think I'd like to be known as a human being who's trying to figure out how to be awake and responsive in these times. And my way of being is very embodied. So I need to just tell you, like, my heart is beating really fast right now. And so how to be a human being, one of the ways that that is informed lately is in, I feel like a dissolving of old identities, like like the ability to look forward to the future I was born into. That's one thing that's dissolving. And so there's great humility in that, in just saying, here I am, and I want to receive guidance and information on how to walk the path. And I also will say that I'm going to turn 60 this year, and this is a very big moment for me in some ways. And I feel like my life belongs to the world and the future. I've never said that before, but I don't have children, I don't have grandchildren. And so there's this feeling of this vast openness in front of me that I'm supposed to give to, so that's like the calling that I feel. I don't like, I think nature created the generations for a reason. There's great wisdom in nature's creation of, you know, there's the elders and the youngers, and we all need each other. And when an elder finds herself in the position of not having actual biological children, it's a very interesting position to be in, because nonetheless, I have a lot to give. And so then where do I give it? You know, so that's animating me right now, is this feeling of I have all this to give, and where does it want to go in these times? So let's see, what else do I want you to know about me? I'm a therapist. I have been a therapist for 20 years. I think that I'm starting to shift in that. Psychology itself is, I think, needs to change. It needs to come out of the individual focus on inside people's own psyches, and it needs to expand and merge with the world. I'm also an educator, and let's see, what else? And a practitioner of embodied spirituality. So I've been on a Buddhist path for a while. And I guess the other thing that I'll say is that my life partner died 10 years ago. So that really has informed my life. Radically changed 10 years ago, and I've been, it's certainly not what I thought it would be. So I guess that's all I'll say for now, and by way of introduction, and I'm sure you'll learn more about me as we go on. But.
All right, well, thank you for that. So if I may, I'd like to just jump right toward the Loneliness Summit. And I'd like to ask you to give me as much as you can about the context that I think you were talking about as you were introducing yourself. And perhaps draw it out a little bit further, like what had you then put this much focus on loneliness? Clearly in your own life or in your practice, you're experiencing some amount of ambient loneliness, and it is somehow noteworthy, significant enough, it's reached a certain, the tide has come into a certain level that you said, we need to talk about this. We need to focus on this, and there are people who have something to say in this arena. And you clearly brought together some heavy hitters. So before we talk about any of them and their particulars, would you say something about what you're seeing is the calling of these times that we were talking about before, and particularly what concerns you when you look out into the world?
Okay. Well, I believe that the calling of these times is to wake up to the way that we are headed towards catastrophe, and yeah, I'm sure there's lots of people who have spoken to that in different ways in your podcast, but I guess to focus on the topic of loneliness, it came through a very personal doorway. Just at a particular time in my life, I was I had moved to a new community, and I was struggling with unbearable loneliness, and I really had this epiphany where I realized, oh, it's not just me, you know. And I looked around, and I saw just right around that time, there were several articles, like in the New York Times and the Washington Post, about using the phrase epidemic of loneliness. So that's no small thing to call it an epidemic. And there's all kinds of research, and my focus hasn't been so much scientific, on tracking all the data. My focus has been more intuitive. So I felt intuitively that this is not just mental health problem, that I saw a connection between loneliness, the affect of loneliness, and the massive scale disconnection that's happening everywhere on the planet, to the point where all of our the systems and the ecosystems that we depend on for our life are unraveling. So that is like, you know, that's disconnection everywhere. And so that is, I came to that the affect of disconnection is loneliness, that this is how it feels on a massive scale for humans to be experiencing the unraveling. And we have a problem in that most of the time when we feel loneliness, we personalize it. We say, oh, it's my fault. I just haven't been good enough at reaching out to my friends, or creating community, or having potlucks, or, you know, I just haven't done it right. There's something wrong with me, and therefore there's no one to blame but myself. And I saw that, no, this is the humanity, our human hearts, I believe, are organs of perception. So when we feel something, it's not just personal. And I actually think this is a really radical way to think about it, because, and it challenges the dominant worldview that we're just all these isolated units walking around having our own private experience. You know, so the fact that so many people are feeling lonely, I saw it as directly connected to all the disruption and disconnection everywhere on the planet. And I felt like, I think because I'm turning 60 this year, and because I've been doing these Buddhist studies, and these Buddhist studies, there's a couple things they talk about. One is you don't know the moment of your death. Like really a deep contemplation. I do not know. Tomorrow something could happen and I could die. So therefore, no time to lose, you know. So that was informing me. I thought I had this insight, and the Buddhist contemplation really encouraged me to not wait. And also the fact of turning 60. And like, what is my life for if not to try and do something? And I felt like, okay, this is mine to do. You know, I could pick and choose. I could go into the supermarket and say, do I want to make this offering to the world, or do I want to make that one? And I could get paralyzed for the next 5 years of trying to choose the perfect offering, you know, or I could just say yes to the one that's knocking on my door, you know, and there it was, you know, and even though part of me went, ew, not that. Nobody wants to hear about loneliness. Ugh. And also, Laura, it's going to be like you're standing naked in front of the world and proclaiming your own failure, quote unquote failure, you know? So I really had to contend with both my inner and outer objections to this topic and say, this is mine to do. It feels so right. Even though I do not want to open the door to it. I don't want to say yes to this project. This project is knocking on my door anyway. Okay, yes. What is my life for other than what am I waiting for, you know? So here I am.
Yeah.
On the other side of it, gratefully on the other side, it's was quite a journey of about 8 months of my life, and very, very, very consuming project, but really, really glad I did it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that tells you a little bit about the inception of the project.
It's just incredible the amount of overlap between what you've just described in your life path and my own. I thank you so much. I feel validated, deeply validated. I don't know how much you've had a chance to look into what any of my stuff, but I named my first and only book to date, The Impossible Conversation, for much the same reason. I literally stumbled and fell face first into the topic that I was called to speak about, which is my shorthand for it at this point is the collapse of Earth and human systems within my old guy lifetime. And talk about the impossible conversation that no one wants to hear about, especially when the punchline is this is the end of infinite growth on a finite planet, which means the party is over. You know, it's not just with enough solar panels, we can keep the party going. No, no, we really need to slow down and stop. So I know from impossible conversations and reluctance to take on a calling that is knocking very loudly at the door. So I so appreciate you telling your story as well.
Yeah, and so there's two things that I want to say about that. One is it's very lonely. You know, yeah, I feel you, Dean, because this is probably going on a little tangent here, but I'll just name it and we can follow it up later. But through you inviting me to be interviewed and through a few other, you know, what I call following the breadcrumbs, which basically means surfing the net, you know, all of these things about what you're talking about, you know, imminent social collapse. I've been really following those breadcrumbs in the last few weeks. And it is very lonely because there's a feeling like, who can I talk to about that? So, and then the other thing, when you said nobody wants to hear about the end of infinite growth, and what I feel is, well, there's always infinite depth. You know, the world is actually infinite in a way, but we don't, not in terms of resource extraction. But so that's why I don't necessarily believe in, I haven't put I haven't voted for near-term human extinction. I actually hope that there are a few humans that get to survive and take up the infinite depth approach to entering into the infinite mystery of life, because that's what I feel is worth living for. So.
Well, thank you for that, and it's worth clarifying from my point of view as well. I am well versed in and well acquainted with the near-term human extinction crowd, and I've never really gotten it about the full Monty of extinction for human beings. I think it's a moot point. I think it's a ridiculous point to really land on and plant a flag in, because there's no there. You know, it's just another way to try and create certainty, only having kind of an odd brand of certainty called, I'm certain we're all going to die. I'm certain we're going to go extinct. And that's what I firmly believe. And everybody else is somehow wimpy if they don't join me here in my extreme point of view. There's a whole conversation I could go into about my interest in organizational dynamics and family dynamics, communication dynamics, and relationship dynamics in all this, and that is definitely a different topic, and maybe maybe I'll be lucky enough to have you over for another couple of conversations. We can go there someday. I just appreciate so much that, you know, I didn't know if we would get here to this place even by the end of the conversation today. This place being where you started by saying, this is such a darn lonely place. This having any amount of awareness of the imminent collapse of Earth and human systems. It's literally the shredding of the fabric that we all grew up thinking this is the way it is forever. Even though it's only been around for about 100 years, this human operating system that we call normal, we can't imagine that there would ever be a time when we wouldn't have this superhuman power called fossil fuels to drive every single component of our world. Yeah, we've had superpowers. And to be the person, to be one of the people to introduce, to bring the message of the party's over. The superpower needs to be put back in the bottle. And if we don't, we'll be doing immense damage to ourselves and to all our other earthling compadres. And the loneliness that's encased or embedded in that role, should we decide to take it on, is, again, it's something that I didn't know. I was really kind of on thin ice, not knowing if that's a place you got to in your conversations or if you personally are already there. I so appreciate you bringing it up. And I just wanted to let you know that I see you, hear you completely in alignment with what you've said. And I'm wondering, is there anything more that you'd like to say about that role and how it lives for you?
Well, let's see. I think it's relatively new for me. Like I've been tracking climate change and all that for many years, but it's relatively new that I'm really thinking about it all the time now, you know. And so I feel like I'm walking in two worlds. There's one foot in the world of all of this is going to end. And then there's another foot in the world of I need to pay my rent, you know? So that's a very strange feeling, you know, and I have so much compassion for everyone else that's stuck in the world of, hey, I need to pay my rent too, you know? So I see how everybody's trapped, you know, and how it makes it very hard to break out of it because the system is so powerful, you know. So that's where I am. I'm really just walking in both worlds. And this year for me is very much about asking for guidance about how to bring myself, be more active in the world. The other thing I should say about the Transforming Loneliness Summit is that part of the reason it was born was very simple. Like I wanted to bring an offering, a class into existence. And I realized that nobody knows me because I'm a introvert who flies under the radar and I have my little quiet life. And so somebody suggested a summit as a way of getting out there. And I saw that it really fit for me because my image from the very beginning was a mandala with loneliness in the middle and then all these spokes radiating out from the center of all the different facets of disconnection and connection. And I saw that a summit, I could have all my speakers represent a different facet of the conversation. So it really suited me to offer a summit. So it wasn't just about expanding my visibility in the world. It was, oh, this really fits with the model that I'm working with.
Yeah.
And it also fit because I had some confidence, like, okay, based on having been a therapist for all these years, I feel like I know how to interview people, you know, and I know how to have a conversation. Yes. So I could feel like I could do it, you know, but so anyway, the whole idea of coming from being quite an introvert into being out in the world more, that's another edge that I'm standing on, you know, as you ask me this question about where's all this going, I feel like I'm still finding out how to, I think this, my identity is shifting more into activism, and that feels right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it feels like, oh, this has been inside me for all these years and it just didn't know how to come out, you know, but I still need to find out, like in terms of like being a community organizer or someone who has potlucks and discussion groups at my house. I don't know if that's me. I really don't know what form it's going to take, you know, so we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the writings of Derek Jensen, but you just reminded me of Derek Jensen. He often shares how he is just introverted as you can get, and and yet, you know, clearly, especially in the early years of his work, being an author worked for a while, but then, you know, really time after time, he was invited out and prodded out to take on a more activist role. And so you just reminded me of him telling those many stories. So thank you. I guess I would just like to speak out a little bit of the jargon, if you will, the way that I contextualize, or the way I articulate everything you've been describing in my version. Same stuff, just different words. You know, I as I was responding to having my woke moment of realizing, oh my God, not only is this really happening at a more accelerated and intensive fashion than I had ever imagined, but every week that goes by and I'm studying more, it's accelerating faster and faster. And that's been the case for 5 years now. And I kept asking myself the simplest question I could, which is what got us into this predicament? And the answer kept coming back. We've disconnected. We've disconnected from self, deeper self, others, earth, and soul. And I noticed that one of your guests is Francis Weller, and I'm a big Francis fan. And I included soul just because he has included it in everything that I've ever read or heard from him. And I'm now a convert. I can't see having the conversation without that word. But I just wanted to give you, you know, just my framing and the jargon that I use for ease of conversation. I break it up that way. And I know there's no real truth to it, but it's just for ease of articulation. I'm very curious, given all you've shared and how quickly we've gotten to this place of this kind of shared ground, were there any surprises that came from any of the voices that you called together for your summit? Anything that really just rocked you back?
Yes. And that's the transformation. You know, it was such a conversation. So, you know, the curation of the event, the deep listening to who do I want to invite and why, and then listening to the interviews with them and hearing what they say and letting those words inside and change me. And then coming out again kind of in a different state from having heard what I heard. So there's a couple things. Two speakers, Francis Weller and Bayo Akomolafe, both talked about loneliness as not a private event, and that it really needs to come out into the public. And they both named ritual. And I even kind of set a challenge for myself this year to offer a loneliness ritual to the public. And I originally had scheduled it for May, and now I've postponed it. But because I'm deep in the question of what would that include, and how would I do it, and who would I collaborate with, et cetera. So it needs to have time to be born. But that whole thing of taking it out of the private hell and into the streets and into the community as a way, and this is a way that I actually see that maybe the whole wrestling with our predicament has a new doorway. You know, if you go in the doorway of people's loneliness, rather than going in the doorway of people's fear about the future, you know, because I've been reading lately that a lot of people shut down if you just want to inundate them with facts about the coming catastrophe. So, but if you can really touch them in a way in their heart, like, hey, you know, your loneliness is not just yours. So that was one thing that came out, was this leaning towards community ritual. And I got that from those two speakers. A couple other things. One was, it wasn't so much in the interview, but it was actually in the talking before the interview. One of the speakers, Tada Hozumi, they use the pronoun they encouraged me to make the summit free. And up until that point, I had been operating on the usual summit model, which is it's free for a few days, and then after that you charge money for it. And I just hadn't even given it much thought. And then Tada invited me to consider the radical implications of making it free. You know, like, what kind of world do I want to live in? Do I want to live in the world where we try and extract money from people just because we can? You know, and clearly it's not about the value of what I'm offering. I had no doubt that this is a very valuable offering. So I'm not diminishing the value by offering it for free. It was really more that I did not want to create any kind of false scarcity. That scarcity is the problem, is part of the problem, this sense of, well, I mean, we could probably have a long philosophical conversation about that, because there is real scarcity, there is limit, but the sense of actually scarcity of connection is the problem. Scarcity of feeling of belonging. So anyway, that was another kind of transformational thing that came, was when Tada invited me to make it for free, and I said yes to that.
Yes.
And then there was another thing that happened, and it's kind of a little embarrassing to say this, but early on in the summit, all of the speakers that I had considered inviting were white people. And and it's just because that was my world, you know, those were the people who I knew or had connections with. And that's a really sad thing about the way our world has evolved into these camps, and the way that whiteness and colonization has proceeded. And so I'm a victim of it as much as anybody else. So here I am, early on in the summit. I invited one of the speakers to join, and she originally said no because all the speakers were white. And it felt like a huge challenge to me. And I said, at first I was like, oh, yes, I get it. This is right. I need to take this on. And then there was this other part of me that said, I can't take this on now. I just need to produce the summit, you know? And then I started again following the breadcrumbs on the internet and started getting into the decolonizing whiteness forest, you know, and finding all these amazing people who are doing amazing work there. And I found Bayo Akomolafe there, and I invited him, and he said yes, which blew my mind. You know, here I am, a nobody, and he was super excited. about the project.
Yeah.
And it felt like a huge boost. So that's another thing. The speakers buoyed me up, you know, and in moments of doubt, I would get something wonderful from them. So then I ended up expanding into the realm of inviting different speakers that were not originally part of my plan. And the summit became much richer, much more complex, much more deep. And then I re-invited the woman who originally said no, and then she said yes. so it was, we had a whole good laugh on that one, and I acknowledged her. I said, thank you so much for saying no. You have no idea how much transformation you set in motion by that moment of integrity.
Yeah.
You know? So anyway, those are just a few stories of the ways that I was changed by what I heard. Actually, I'll say one more thing. Bayo Akomolafe also brought up this whole thing about brokenness.
Yeah.
Brokenness being necessary for connection.
Yeah.
And that's been something that I've been thinking a lot about, how maybe that's part of the premise of the Transforming Loneliness Summit in the first place. Like, in order to instigate a conversation about loneliness, I had to be willing to go first. I had to be the one who would say, okay, I'll say it first. I'm lonely, you know, and I'll leave my shame at the door first, you know, and I'll invite you all in to have this conversation with me. But that's led to deeper exploration of how the brokenness doesn't stop there. You know, how can I continue to invite openness, vulnerability, brokenness, for lack of a better word, that will allow me to have me and everyone to have deeper connections, intimacy, realness with each other. So I'm sorry, a phone's ringing. I'm going to turn it off.
Okay.
One other thing that came out was, and this, through following some threads, I came across an article called Nurturance Culture is the Opposite of Rape Culture.
Mm.
And this is by, I don't remember the woman's name. It's Nora Samorian or something like that. So I apologize for not having the reference right. But if you search under Nurturance Culture is the Opposite of Rape Culture, you'll find a very powerful article, which is all about how do we learn how to nurture each other. And the article is actually geared towards men, because men aren't acculturated so much towards nurturance. But anyway, this really led me to think that nurturance is the opposite of competition. And that's what we need, how to relearn how to do. Because in our daily life, we just see ourselves as these isolated units that are consumers, you know, or these individual units that just have to get ours. You know, that's like how we're acculturated to operate when we wake up in the morning, is how can I get mine today, you know? And I think nurturance helps to break that down. The idea of how can I give today? How can I nurture today? So those are some of the kind of cutting edge of what came out of the summit for me.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's one more, but I'll wait. I'll say that in a minute. I want to see if there's something you want to say. No.
No, I don't. I would rather not slow down your flow. You're right in it. And so,
Okay.
what's this next one?
There's one other thing, and that is longing. So I found that what is buried in loneliness is longing, and that longing is holy. And one of my speakers, Jeannine Zandi, actually used that phrase. And another speaker, Tokopa Turner, she talked about longing in her interview. And so both of those speakers helped me to really inquire what is longing. And I know that probably many of the Sufis have written extensively on this, so I don't pretend to have a scholarly take on it. Mm-hmm. My take is my personal take, which is, I believe that longing is the life force that is rising up, and it has an incredible life-affirming and creative power. And it is, we don't know how to be in right relationship with our longing. And so it's buried underneath loneliness. It's like the hidden gem. It's the diamond inside loneliness. And so many of us, we don't even answer the door when loneliness knocks. We hate it so much, we just turn the other way. We say, forget that. I'm going to go watch some Netflix, or I'm going to go have some beer, you know. So, but we miss out on our longing, which is our ability to really, I think it's the life force. It's you know, the proverbial acorn becoming an oak tree. It's the energy that wants to come into the world and give. It's not about getting, it's about giving. It's about becoming like that oak tree. That acorn has this longing to become the oak tree. Mm-hmm. There's a way that we are, at least humans are supposed to be, taking our place in the ecosystem as somebody who has something to give. Mm-hmm. And everything has gotten skewed. So now we're focused on what we can get. And largely because, like you mentioned, what got us into this predicament? Disconnection. So we're so disconnected. So of course we feel like we don't have anything to give. Yeah. You know, so I understand that it's this self-reinforcing process.
Right.
But longing is where it's at for me, and it's also incredibly painful. It is very, very painful to feel it, you know, and I guess I'm saying, yes, I'm willing to feel that pain. So that's why, even though I thought I had this secret hope that after the summit, my pain would be less. Yeah. Actually, it's gotten worse because I'm more awake, but I'm more connected. You know, this is the price we pay of being connected to the world, is we feel the pain of the world.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I guess I just have to be growing my capacity to feel more pain, which also is lonely in a world of people who just want to get distracted and have some fun, you know, and I feel like, oh God, what a downer I am, you know, because here I am just aware of all the pain of the world. And then I keep reading about people like Jem Bendel and all of them talking about how we can get to the place of having greater appreciation and love for the present moment and the beauty and wonder of what life is. And I'm not quite there yet. I'm still in the pain. Yeah. So, I mean, I have my moments. I am coming more and more back into the present moment, but there's a lot of pain right now. So.
Yeah. So I would just like to stop for a moment and breathe, because I'm very moved by what you just shared, and it's very familiar territory that you're describing. And I don't know that it's what I can share from my experience of a similar path is I didn't get to just land in a finally in a place where I could feel the core joy again and feel that deep connection and that grace. Uh, and then that just stays and off I go in that good state. No, it just happens in waves like life always has. And I guess I've just got the, one of the benefits or something I could say is that I get to be there more often. So yay.
Yeah.
And I also really want to acknowledge you for you've covered so much ground, and I really thank you. I'm hoping this is not our last conversation. There's a lot of territory that deserves some time and some mapping out that I think will serve others who are wanting to move forward as well. In the face of a predicament-laden world. You included so much inclusivity. You included so much about your own humility, your own humble, um, kind of your eyes got opened as you shared, and you really took the invitation and ran with it to not try and form it in some preconceived way, but to let it grow on its own. And most importantly, I would like to acknowledge that you allowed yourself to be changed by this incredible process. And so if people aren't already, really interested in already in another window on their computer, digging around for, following the links that I'll put in the show notes for your summit, I can't imagine that anyone who's gotten this far into the interview wouldn't be digging into those interviews and lining them up for view in the near future.
Dean?
Yeah.
Can I say one more thing, or do you want to finish your thought and then I'll say it?
I don't need to finish anything.
Okay. So one other area that got woke up for me is the work of Johann Hari and Bruce Alexander around the topic of addiction. And they are both completely on the same page of what you and I are talking about, which is the fallout of globalization. And I don't know, are you familiar with Johann Hari or Bruce K. Alexander's work?
Johann Hari, yes. Bruce Alexander's a new name to me. And I would just add that I just got back from a week's worth of exposure to Gabor Mate and his work about addiction. And I was there because, and it sounds like I need to look up these folks. I'd like to have you go and say more about them. But I want to say that I've been really reaching out to directly experience the work as much as I can of people that I'm including in the body of work that I'm doing now, the second book and the workbook that goes with it and so on. I need to really get a sense of who these people are and viscerally, experience the integrity of their work and who they are as facilitators or thought leaders. And so that's why I made a point of getting into the diving headfirst into the work of compassionate inquiry that is what Gabor Mate calls his stuff, and found it very, very valuable. Can you share a little bit more about Johann Hari or Bruce Alexander?
Yeah, so Johann Hari wrote a recent book called Lost Connections. And he's going in through the doorway of depression, which, you know, a lot of people might even kind of conflate loneliness and depression. I think they're different, but and he explores, I think, 9 different facets of how our world is disconnected and how it's misunderstood. Focusing on treating depression through giving the masses antidepressants is exactly the wrong way to go, because they feel depressed for a very good reason.
Yep.
You know? And so, you know, the medicine approach just isn't the way to go. So, and then he based a lot of what he wrote based on Bruce Alexander's work. And Bruce Alexander did a study called, you may have heard of the rat park experiments.
Mm-hmm.
And what that is, you know, if you give a rat everything they could ever want, like playmates and good food and toys and fresh air and water, then the rat is not going to take the drug. And so it's very clear that that the reason that there's an epidemic of addiction in the world is because we're not living in Rat Park. You know, you know, we're deprived in so many different ways of the primary satisfactions. And Bruce Alexander uses he uses the phrase uprooted or torn. It's like we are torn from our roots in, you know, the different facets you already named, like in the earth, in community, in life-affirming culture, in families, in our connection to our ancestors, in our connection to a local place that we call home. And so globalization is this kind of uprooting, and you can even, you can even kind of hear a scream. You know, that's, if we could hear the wavelength that plants communicate on, we might hear a scream when a plant gets pulled out of the ground. And I think that scream is loneliness. The feeling of what it feels like to be pulled out of everything that our whole genetic history, our whole being is primed to expect. And the thing is that because those roots are invisible, you know, on a plant, you can see the roots. And on us humans, we have invisible roots. And the way our culture has gone, we think that things that are invisible don't exist, or they can be ignored or marginalized. And we do that at our peril. You know, that we have roots just as much as a plant does. And we need to really learn how to honor those. That's what I really appreciate about Bruce K. Alexander. He talks about the direct effect of globalization.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea, I mean, when we really think about it, it's kind of crazy to think that us human animals could thrive in a globalized kind of world. You know, I think we're kind of made to be local. But I guess there's a lot more we could discuss about that. But
yeah. So again, I'd like to just pause, because again, we've gotten to a place in this conversation that's pretty familiar to me, given this is the pool I swim in all the time. Every once in a while, I need to just stop and remember what we're talking about. And I so appreciate that you have just swept us for a moment into something that's very important in my orientation, which is the addiction frame, to see our behavior collectively. And really we're nudging right up toward the other one that's newer and even more pervasive in this particular frame of that I'm working in is we're founded, this business as usual human operating system, particularly in the USA, is so founded in the delivery of trauma and violence, and we have so normalized that it takes a spectacular amount of disconnection from the web of life, from all the primary sources of meaning in human life, the deeper self, others, earth, soul, have to be completely cut off to be able to do what we're doing. You know, because you have to be literally living in a cave at this point to not get the level of devastation that's going on and the imminent collapse of earth and human systems. It just really goes right to it. And the thing that I want to pause about, and really the culmination of what I'm hoping to say, is that there is no larger expression of trauma and violence than extinction.
Right. Yeah.
And we are so normalized to the level of disconnection that we call normal, that we go about our workaday lives with a book on the New York Times bestseller list called The Sixth Mass Extinction.
Yeah. And we're still not doing anything about it.
Right.
And it takes, a 16-year-old Swedish girl to spearhead the movement. So
yeah,
I know it's just shocking.
So if I may, I'd like to just tie a thread from where we are right now and this little point to the earlier point that I found myself moved in as well, and just really acknowledge you were almost apologetic for how you hadn't quite gotten to, perhaps it's Jem Bendel's encouraged forward-lookingness. I'm sorry, I'm not saying it exactly as you did, but I just would like to validate. I want you to know I see you, and I so appreciate you just saying what's so about the process, that, what it takes to be engaged in this process, whether folks do what you do with your summit and with your practice and your own life expression, or if they did what I did. Everyone has to choose whatever they choose, but it's getting to this choice point that is really the difficult. In my experience, getting to this place where I can then choose is really the hard work. The choice is almost a gift and a release, in my experience.
When you say a choice point, say more. What is the choice that you see?
Well, I just look back into how you shared about how you came about putting together a loneliness summit. It sounded to me like a combination of an upwelling of intent that you weren't even conscious of within yourself, and some number of outside influences, and those came together into this gorgeous and courageous expression of a loneliness summit. And you know what? We're not going to charge for it. Hey. So, and I can certainly speak for a similar thing, that when I spent a few months vetting the information that came in my woke moment, and when I can remember the day when I was in the final article of dozens that I had read in order to vet the material, and I realized, oh shit, this is really happening. And given what I know, having been decades in the training and facilitation and coaching business, given what I know about human beings, this is the impossible conversation. This is the transformation of humanity, whether we're ready for it or not, whether we want it or not. This is really happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so began, many layers of the onion being peeled back in my own experience to a core that, it seems like you've peeled back layers to a similar level.
Yeah, I hear you. So that's the choice point you're talking about, where you say yes to what seems to be calling you, the calling of the times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gabor Mate, in that conference or class that I was in, he said time and again, the process he was working with us was basically looking at how often we, in this business as usual human operating system, how often we really do the default mode of living, which tends to be reaching out for some substitute for truly nurturing attachment that wanted to happen when we were infants and usually didn't, and trauma upon bump upon grind, we become who we are. And as adults, we now, on a daily, perhaps hourly basis, we make choices for some imitation, some false bauble that seems to promise some kind of attachment in the moment, some substitute attachment, as opposed to, and the cost of that being our authenticity in the moment, what is truly that upwelling of intent that I was trying to point out, having seen you describe that in your process. So here we are in default living, making these constant, one after the other choices to forfeit our authenticity in life and our connection with the web of life for these simulations of real attachment.
Yeah, and if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that if we didn't do that, if we didn't forfeit our authenticity in that moment, what we would do in that moment is we would say something like, I am a being who is experiencing an upwelling of intent, or I'm experiencing a longing for a feeling of attachment, for what I didn't get as an infant, or maybe even a longing for those invisible roots I was talking about earlier. Because attachment, there's no mistake that is referring to our rootedness in each other, our rootedness in the ground, our in culture, in soul. And so, yeah, I hear you. If we didn't do the thing that business as usual calls for, instead we would be just voicing our longing. Mm-hmm. We say, okay, here I am. I'm a human being who's feeling some longing for connection, for realness, for nourishment, for giving and receiving nourishment, for reciprocity. It's not just about getting. I want to feel that others receive what I have to give too, and that give and take.
Yeah. And I guess here I would offer again just an alternative jargon or way of mapping the same territory, and that is what you're calling longing. In this track, I would probably call truth of the moment. What is truth that is upwelling in this experience, in the moment, and is so relatively clear compared to the personality, the damaged human being that is so struggling to find meaning and find connection. And I'll reach out and, you know, consume whatever it is to distract myself and so on. Yeah. Yeah. You know, we've spent an hour doing this. It's amazing how fast that went by for me.
Yeah.
Are you still feeling nervous?
No. I am feeling just awe at how much territory we covered, and feel like, okay, I need to rewatch this video. Hope you'll send me a copy of it soon. Yeah, because just very, very, very rich.
Yeah.
And where we came to at the end, you know, this moment of where we could do business as usual, or where we can speak truth of the moment. That's a very powerful, vulnerable moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the nature of the work I'm putting together, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Thank you for your work, the work you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of sending you a copy of this video, what I'd actually like to request is if you would subscribe to the Poetry of Predicament podcast. You'll just get an immediate update, and then I'll undoubtedly be bugging you with other invitations to pursue some of the threads of this conversation in the near future, if that would be okay.
That would be great. It would be most welcome. And in fact, I will admit to really wanting to just have conversations with you.
Yeah.
Because of needing a friend in this world of where we're both traveling.
Yep.
So that is a desire that I have. So.
Yeah, gladly. And I guess in closing, at least one of the points that you brought up, I've been connected with the Jem Bendel and his folks that are putting together a forum, a global forum. Let me unpin your video. In fact, let's just do that for a little while. So it's just a couple of weeks ago that they opened up this forum, this online Ning forum. And I'm going to be coordinating one small pocket of the coaching and counseling component of a number of different components that the forum is broken up into. And so perhaps there's a way we could also meet there, because first and foremost, I'm hearing you're reaching out and suggesting that we could connect, not about podcast interviews, but really just deepen a connection here and just see what might want to happen out of deeper conversations and so on. And I'm an absolute yes for that, and thank you.
Yeah, great. That sounds great.
Secondary to that is this possibility to talk about something that could make inroads on someone feeling lonely. There's a possibility of as much connection around the world as one might want coming soon. So yeah.
Great. I'm on the positive deep adaptation Facebook page. So they have a whole forum going there. But yeah, I heard about the other one.
Yeah.
And I didn't join it because I'm not a professional in that world, but at least I didn't consider myself one. So
Yeah, and I wouldn't worry about that. I think it was the LinkedIn thing was about being professional or academic, and I could really give a rat's ass about all that because there's nobody that's saying anything worth listening to, you know, with and maybe 4 or 5 professionals on the planet in terms of organizational development or true sustainable living and blah blah blah. So anyway, the LinkedIn thing I think was originally kind of limited that way. This forum is not that I'm aware of.
All right. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to further ways of staying connected. That sounds good. And thank you so much for your invitation and for this really rich conversation.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if I could ask you just one last thing before you go.
Yeah.
If you would look back into your experience of the Loneliness Summit and hearing from people with so much richness to draw on to address that topic, and your own being kind of the container, you being the container to hold all that, is there a little bit that you could just leave us with that is I asked you before about what surprised you. Is there anything that really just was like a soothing, had a soothing nature to it that you were left with out of any of your experience of the summit of about loneliness?
Oh. Soothing. Let's see. Yeah, I guess one of the main points that was healing and soothing for me was to get over the uh, feeling that well, loneliness, part of the reason that it's painful is that it involves a feeling of deficiency, you know, that there's something missing inside, you know, there's something missing. That's at the root of loneliness. All loneliness starts with the unmet need for connection. And so when we come in contact with it, we first touch the insufficiency, and it's so painful that we immediately want to get away from it. Mm-hmm. And when we want to get away from the insufficiency, we can go in 2 places. One is finding the bad guy out there, and the other is finding the bad guy in here. You know, so we try and avoid the pain of just feeling that something is missing by finding the bad guy. Mm-hmm. And if we can not go that route of finding the bad guy, but just stay with that moment of feeling the insufficiency, just feeling it. And when I talked earlier about the infinite nature of reality, there's a way that you can go infinitely deep into what does that insufficiency actually feel like phenomenologically, like what is that? And worlds will reveal themselves to you if you can dive in, if you can avoid going to finding the bad guy. So I don't know if that offers solace or soothing, but it did help me to realize that I'm not the bad guy. And, you know, that's not to say I don't play a personal role in the way that my life has unfolded. We all do. But there was something profoundly soothing to realize that finding the bad guy actually is a distraction. It's a false, trying to find a false solution,
Yeah.
you know. And so I know I'm prescribing a rather difficult road, which is to stay with that moment of insufficiency. You know? But that's what I can offer right now, because that's where I'm at. I haven't found a better answer than that.
Yeah. Well, Laura Parker, thank you so much for your work in the world, for your participation in the very summit that you created. And thank you so much for your humble but powerful presence in this conversation. It's very, it's very moving to have you here. And I so thank you. And I look forward to many more conversations. And I wish you so well as you expand into whatever the next expression is going to be.
Thank you so much, Dean. I look forward to that as well.
All right.
For inviting me.
Well, I'll send you a notice when this is up and ready to go, and take good care of yourself.
All right. Thank you. You too, Dean.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance, www.livingresilience.net. Music today from Michael Hedges, as always, and also Port Blue Into the Sea. Also available on our website, www.livingresilience.net, is a wide array of articles, online learning series, arranging group and individual resilience coaching, and sign up for our every other Tuesday free support group that we call Safe Circle Calls.